In the not-so-distant future, the world had plunged into chaos. A totalitarian regime known as the United Government had seized control, imposing a draconian rule in the name of security. Cities were razed to the ground without warning, all in the name of rooting out terrorists. For the citizens, fear had become a constant companion, and survival meant playing a never-ending game of chance. Amelia, a young woman with a heart full of defiance, had grown up in this dystopian world. Her childhood had been marred by the constant threat of destruction. Friends and family had been lost to the merciless bombings that the United Government claimed were necessary sacrifices. One fateful morning, Amelia awoke to the blaring sirens and the cold voice of the United Government's announcement. "Emergency protocol initiated. Immediate evacuation required. Stay indoors." It was an all-too-familiar warning that signaled impending doom. Amelia's heart raced as she gathered her meager belongings and dashed out of her makeshift shelter. Panic coursed through the crowded streets as people rushed to the designated evacuation zones. The sky was a sickly gray, the air filled with the acrid smell of smoke and fear. As Amelia reached the evacuation zone, she scanned the faces around her, searching for her best friend, Lucas. They had been inseparable since childhood, survivors in a world that had stolen their innocence. But Lucas was nowhere to be found. Desperation gripped her as the deafening roar of the approaching government aircraft grew closer. Without thinking, she dashed back into the streets, calling his name. Her heart pounded as she navigated the labyrinth of alleyways, hoping to find him in time. Amelia's search was futile. As the aircraft loomed overhead, its ominous shadow falling across the city, she knew she had to return to the evacuation zone. She arrived just as the bombs began to fall, the deafening explosions ripping through the city. The ground shook beneath her feet as buildings crumbled and screams filled the air. The United Government's ruthless disregard for civilian lives was evident as the city was reduced to rubble. Amelia clenched her fists, tears streaming down her face. She had lost Lucas, just as she had lost so many others. Days turned into weeks as Amelia wandered through the wasteland that had once been her home. The city was unrecognizable, reduced to a haunting, desolate landscape. The United Government's relentless pursuit of terrorists had left nothing but destruction in its wake. Amelia had heard whispers of resistance groups, pockets of hope in the darkness. She was determined to find them, to join the fight against the oppressive regime that had stolen so much from her. She knew that the path ahead would be dangerous, but she had nothing left to lose. She encountered other survivors along the way, each one bearing their own stories of loss and pain. Together, they formed an unspoken alliance, a shared determination to defy the United Government's tyranny. They moved in the shadows, always one step ahead of the government's watchful eye. Amelia's journey led her to the outskirts of a hidden resistance camp. The camp was a patchwork of tents and underground bunkers, a place where hope still burned despite the darkness that surrounded it. As she entered the camp, Amelia was greeted by a group of rebels who had dedicated their lives to fighting back. They welcomed her with weary smiles, recognizing the fire in her eyes. Among them was a leader named Daniel, a charismatic figure who had seen the atrocities of the United Government firsthand. Daniel spoke of their mission: to gather intelligence, to undermine the government's propaganda, and to give the citizens a voice. They were determined to expose the truth about the government's actions, to bring an end to the reign of terror. Amelia was no stranger to sacrifice, and she knew that the fight would be perilous. But she had found a new purpose, a reason to keep pushing forward. With the resistance, she was no longer just a survivor. She was a warrior, ready to stand against the oppression that had plagued their world for too long. As the days turned into months, the resistance grew stronger, gaining support from those who had once been silent. Amelia's determination and courage inspired others to join their cause, to stand up against the government's cruelty. Amelia and the resistance continued their struggle, each act of defiance bringing them one step closer to their goal. They knew that they were fighting an uphill battle, but they believed in the power of unity, in the strength of the human spirit. In the heart of the dystopian darkness, hope flickered like a distant star, a beacon guiding them through the long, treacherous night. Amelia had found her purpose, and with each passing day, she moved closer to a future where freedom and justice could finally triumph over fear and oppression.